Welcome to the Dreams Are Real podcast, where we aim to ignite the fire that allows you to unleash your greatest potential. I'm your host, Dan McPherson, and I'm on a mission to help you own your story on the way to building your ideal life. The first step toward achieving your dreams is to overcome the momentum of zero. Take a step and let that motion dispel the emotions of fear, worry, or self-doubt. No matter where you are in your life or career, only you can make that choice. The good news, you've got this. Why? Because dreams are real. Let's dive in. Welcome to the Dreams Are Real podcast. I'm Dan McPherson, and I am excited to have you here. I'm also excited to have this week's guest, my friend, amazing adventure star, Dan Zehner. Welcome, Dan. Glad to have you.
Thanks, Dan. Glad to be here, and looking forward to talking with you, man.
I am looking forward to talking with you as well. It is always a scintillating conversation when we get together, and I'm excited to share this with our audience. For those of you in the audience, Dan is not only a good and a funny guy, he works in operations for a couple of different places. He works for universities. I think he's joining like the NASA space program or something. We'll get into that in a little while. He works with Go Ruck and is maybe the single most adventurous guy that I know. He is also a podcaster in his own right and runs a group called Anthem of the Adventurer, as well as being a member of a number of other groups and friendships that I'm involved with. So glad to dive in, Dan. Did I do that any justice at all?
Yeah, man, you got it close enough for government work, which I'm intimately familiar with.
Well, as we talk about government work, that makes me want to ask you, how do you respond when people ask you what you do? Because I know we were talking even before we started recording, and I'm thinking you do 97 different things. How do I say that? So how do you answer it?
I give the typical engineer answer. It depends.
That's a great answer. Can you pin that down a little more for our audience?
Okay, so currently, my 2 day jobs, I split half time at 2 different university research centers at Purdue. One of them is focused on natural hazards and work with 12 different universities, as you said, doing operations management. And we basically try to help society and infrastructure and our built environment be resilient to hurricanes and earthquakes and tsunami and coastal erosion, that kind of thing. My other hat is doing operations for a new NASA-sponsored research center called Resilient Extraterrestrial Habitats Institute. No, we aren't making houses for little green men. It's essentially our scientists are working to write the design manual for housing on the moon and Mars. So I'm wrangling the scientist cats to try and get them pin them down to a strategic plan and get them to actually execute it.
So when you say you're spread thin, you really mean that you're spread all the way to Mars right now?
Oh, yeah.
So are you going to go live on Mars or the moon as well and get to test the habitat?
I'll do the testing, but I probably wouldn't live there until I'm able to return regularly. My wife doesn't want to live on Mars. So.
Fair enough. And we know that's going to make it a no for you. No one-way trips, right?
No one-way trips.
Oh, glad to hear that. Before we dive too much further into your current work, I'd love to hear and have you share with the audience your personal origin story. Where does the magic of Dan Zehner come from?
How far back do you want to go? Because it is a winding road.
Well, so that we avoid the Edward Gibbon version, the history of the rise and fall of the Roman Empire. We'll I think go back as far as makes sense for you of what really formed Adventure Dan. What key things were the genesis of maybe who you are now, and give us a version.
Yeah, so a couple of things growing up. My family is a bunch of farmers. My mom and dad, both sides. My mom's side was dairy farmers. My dad's side has a farm out in Illinois. And so summers were spent, visiting family on the farm and just screwing around in the barn and chasing the barn cats and like shooting things with BB guns and, just
Hopefully
generally.
not the barn cats.
Yeah, not the barn cats. No,
Okay.
usually inanimate objects. But
Okay.
that kind of was just the spirit of exploration was thick. We also, when we moved from Minnesota to Illinois when I was a kid, our house backed up to a ravine, and I'd go down there for hours and hours thinking I was, the next, Lewis and Clark charting the little stream all the way down to the Illinois River. Didn't quite make it, but I remember one time we we followed it far enough to where it hit someone's backyard that was a farm. We found an electric fence that ran over the river, little stream, and some of my friends, we dared each other to touch it.
And
nothing came of it, but we all thought it was hilarious. It was
you
alive.
weren't permanently scarred by an electric fence?
No.
I've had some electric fence experiences, so that's I guess a bonding point for us.
Yeah. Just stuff like that growing up, and I was also in Scouts. I'm an Eagle Scout, so that kind of formed part of my adventures. I remember one of my favorite merit badges was the Wilderness Survival one. No surprise there, but I earned that in a camp called Cache Lake in the Boundary Waters in Canada, and I built. So part of the merit badge, you have to build your own shelter and sleep in it for a night. So I found this rock with an overhang on the side of a hill overlooking the lake, and built this little lean-to and put my sleeping bag in there and put some pine needles down and made a little fire and listened to the loons all night, and then woke up in the morning to a wet foot because it rained at night and I didn't make my shelter big enough.
But you still got the badge.
But I still got the badge. So stuff like that growing up.
Are your shelters better now?
My shelters are much better now. My fires are also much better now. Stuff like that growing up kind of just laid dormant, unfortunately, once I got into the working world, which is kind of what led me to building my current business. So
seems like that happens to a lot of people, right?
It happens to a lot of people. I find it, one of the things I've been finding a lot of guys in their mid-20s to early 30s get into this situation where they kind of lose that sense of adventure, but also guys in their late 50s to early 60s as they're kind of coming to the end of their career and looking towards retirement and wondering, when was the last time I went camping? I have no idea. When was the last time I did anything, that required perseverance? I don't know. So those two camps, kind of interesting how that happens. Anyway, so my origin story to kind of wrap up here. I started my professional work as a mechanical engineer, graduated from the University of Illinois with a degree in mechanical engineering, and took what was my dream job at the time, doing hydraulic systems engineering for nuclear submarines.
That's a pretty nice job.
It was pretty cool for the most part. Some Friday afternoons, if I got all my work done, I would go down to the shipyard and poke around the engine room of a submarine to learn how everything worked and was operated and put together. And there's nothing better than coming home at the end of the day smelling like hydraulic fluid, which was great. And sometimes I'd just sit in the machine shop and watch them make torpedo tubes and missile hatches and things like that. It was a really cool environment. Obviously it came with its own, day job baggage and things like any job does, but there were some really great highlights. Spent about 4 years there, and my entrepreneurial spirit got started there. One of the positions I took, I did a really good job at helping one of our directors put together his session for the Submarine Technology Symposium. It's this big secret classified conference, and I helped him select his speakers and get them prepared and everything. And after my time of working for him with that and a couple other things, he's like, "Hey, where do you want to go in the company? Like, pick a spot. We'll make it happen for you." I landed in mechanical weapon systems, which I'd always wanted to try out. And the program officer in charge of the program I was working for was like, "Hey, we need somebody to research 3D printing in the shipyard." I was like, "Ooh, that sounds cool." And so I spent the next year and a half essentially building a business within the company to build the business case for 3D printing at the shipyard. I had to sell it to 47 engineering managers and their 11 directors above them, eventually the VP of engineering and the VP of IT. I still remember presenting to her. She was kind of a dragon and was known to be really hard on people. And I was going to ask for 2 machines that were going to total about $350,000. And she's like, yeah, go for it. Get both of them. Like, whoa, would have been surprised with one, but okay. And
you slayed the dragon.
I slayed the dragon, and a few weeks later, bundle of equipment shows up at the loading dock with my name on it. That's $350,000 worth of machinery. I'm like, oh crap, this is really happening. And they're still using it to this day. I talked to the guy who's still running the 3D printing group, and they are putting 7 parts on the submarine that are actually qualified to be on the ship.
That's amazing. And
yeah.
all because you slayed a dragon.
All because I slayed the dragon, yeah. And that got me,
go ahead.
That got me thinking about like, oh, I can create anything that I want whenever I want to. It kind of got me that spark a little bit. So we started having kids and didn't want to live in New England, so far away from our family in the Midwest, and moved here to Indiana. I got a job at Subaru as a manufacturing engineer, which only lasted 9 months, which would be no surprise to you, is because I saw a version of myself in the future I didn't like. I was working a lot of weekends, a lot of long weekends, because basically any time we had to do our projects is when the line was shut down. And there was guys in there who were about 4 or 5 years older than me, already on their second marriage and missing important things in their kids' lives. Like one guy was like, yeah, I'm missing my kid's first soccer game today. I'm like, the hell are you doing here? We're doing some unimportant project. Like, he didn't need to be there. And I'm like, this is the kind of stuff that I'm going to be asked to do if I stay here. So I left.
Was that scary?
It was really scary because it was a job that we had moved halfway across the country for. And
did you leave with another job or without one?
I left with one. My boss basically said, you either need to, figure things out or we're going to let you go. And so I figured things out and left before that. And
nice little proactive choice.
Yeah. And so I moved across town to the Caterpillar plant there. It worked out. But in between there, funnily enough, on like probably my last week of working for Subaru, I got an email from somebody who saw some of my furniture work. I had started building furniture in my basement when we were in Connecticut. I sold a couple things, and one of them was a bench built out of broken hockey sticks. And
cool.
I got an email from somebody who's like, hey, can I order a few of those? I was like, how many is a few? And so I gave him my phone number. We talked that night. Turns out he was a marketing agent for Rogers. For those of you who don't know, that's basically like the AT&T of Canada.
Oh, wow.
And he was putting together this thing called the Hometown Hockey Tour, 25-city tour in Canada with a big broadcast trailer and a festival. And they would have a festival in each of these cities for a weekend. And then they would broadcast on this huge screen the, Hockey Night in Canada game of the week with Ron McLean, who is kind of like the John Madden of hockey there.
So very big, very famous name, right?
Very famous guy. And so they're like, hey, we want one of your benches to be a thank you gift for each of these towns.
Wow.
Like, holy crap. Like, I guess I have a furniture business now. And so my adventure was about a 3-month long exodus in being covered in carbon fiber dust and goo gone. And it was nuts. Like, if you ever have a bar trivia question of how many hockey sticks fit in the back of a Subaru, it is 550, because I could not.
I'll make a note of that. I think I might need it soon.
But it was awesome. Like, I got my whole family involved. My neighbors gave me some really weird looks when I was assembling these benches out on the front yard. I even made it on Reddit. Somebody posted a picture of my benches with like, the only way this could be more Canadian is if you like painted your house with a Canadian flag and there was a moose apologizing behind one of the benches and it was snowing. Hilarious. But that really got me thinking, like, wow, I could make a pretty good side hustle out of this stuff. Nothing ever came out of the benches. One of my skills that I hadn't and still I'm working on developing was selling things. and couldn't get anybody to buy another one. But it was a great way to learn how to build a business. And worked for another couple of years at Caterpillar after that as a validation engineer. Kind of a boring job for the most part, but I learned a lot about operating well in a team. I was starting to learn about leadership there. I started reading a ton about personal development and leadership at that job. And by the time I left it, I was ready to start really being more intentional with my time.
When you were reading, Dan, about personal development and leadership, was there any one book or one person that really jumped out at you that said, this is the one for me?
Yep. It was actually a book that my mentor from the shipyard, his name was Ken Steinschultz. Whew, that's a different Ken. Anyway, his name is not important. Mentor of mine from the shipyard gave me this book idea. It was on his shelf. He's like, you need to read this someday. The book is called Turn the Ship Around by David Marquet. So he's a retired Navy captain, of course, talking about how he turned the worst performing ship in the submarine fleet into the best performing by what he calls intent-based leadership.
So I have to say a thank you to you, because you turned me on to that book, which I then read, which has now become one of the top 5 books I recommend to new leaders. And you'll find its link on our Current Leaders Must Lead website as one of my top recommended books. For those of you in the audience who are studying leadership, one of the first 5 that you should listen to or read, definitely that book. It will give you a very different, very powerful perspective. We'll include a link to that book in the show notes for sure. So I am with you, and I thank you for sharing it with me.
Hey, you're welcome. It was amazing. It was one of those like, wow, I could actually do this, And I brought it to my boss, and he's like, yeah, we should do this. And it was the first time in a long time, because I had been burned really bad at the Subaru job. I'm not going to badmouth anybody. There's no bad blood or anything, but it was disheartening there. Like we didn't work well together ideas wise at the Subaru job. And so being able to hear, oh yeah, we should do our leadership differently here because we can get better, was a really amazing thing. And so getting to implement some of that was really powerful and helpful for me.
That really launched you on your way.
It did, yeah. So a couple years later, Caterpillar had a downturn and was laying off a bunch of people, and myself included. Thankfully, my boss and I kind of both saw the writing on the wall, and so started applying everywhere in town. I think I put in like 10 or 11 different applications at Purdue, and one of them stuck. And ended up at my current job of all the operations coordination all the time. But
it's a pretty fun journey.
Yeah, it's been a really fun journey, and where I'm at now is like my boss is fantastic and allowing me flexibility to learn and grow and apply things even outside of my core responsibilities. As long as I get my stuff done, I can take leadership courses. I could teach leadership courses, which I'm doing now. We'll get into that a little bit later, I imagine. But it's been a really great environment for personal and professional growth that has let me explore adventure as a profession, along with the engineering and science.
Sounds like an amazing journey. And what I hear as themes throughout what you're talking about are you looking for adventure, of course, you saying yes to opportunities rather than no, but looking forward to what creates the yes, and you exploring new frontiers, whether it be the ocean or space, whether it be one place to work or a different career or NASA or adventure or in the field. Seems like those are themes that come through. Would you agree with those?
Yeah, I think so. And I think I've hit on almost every major mode of transportation in my career except for air travel so far.
Yeah, that's that is. I was going to ask if we're covering them all, if you still have something to do with airplanes now, but not yet, really.
Not yet, no.
Well, there's still hope for you.
There's still hope.
During our conversations for this podcast, we spend a reasonable amount of time talking about dreams. I think there's a power to the dreams that people have as kids, that people have as adults, how they change. So when you were younger, you mentioned that you were going out and looking around the creek like you were Lewis and Clark. Was your dream to be an adventurer? Was your dream to be a wanderer? Or were you like, I'm going to grow up and be an engineer, darn it? Like,
Yeah,
what
actually, I knew from a very young age I wanted to be a mechanical engineer. It was really funny because I come from a whole family of engineers, most of whom went to University of Illinois. So it was kind of almost predestined. A couple of things. I was really influenced heavily by video games, and one of them in particular was called Mech Warrior, where you played as a pilot of a 30-foot tall walking robot in the 31st century. And I'm like, wow, I want to build those. And then I read Hunt for Red October way too many times and thought submarines would be a really cool career, and basically made every excuse to write about submarines any chance I got in U.S. history class in high school, and then economics class the next year, and then in college a couple of papers ended up about submarines. I actually ended up writing about my future employer in economics class about how the defense spending to defense contractors like the General Dynamics shipyard affects the local economy. It was kind of interesting. But
you apparently are very prescient. You were very future looking in every way.
Yeah, I was laser focused to a fault, I think, about that dream, because I did what I thought everyone said I should do and made that my dream. I made it work.
So what's changed about that dream between then and now? Or I guess maybe first, what made the dream did the dream shrink? And if so, what made that happen? You talked about how adventure shrank and sort of went away before it came back. Did that happen with the dream, or did you just stay attached to that dream until it happened?
Yeah, there was a couple of moments. The biggest was, I got into the job and I'm like, wow, we're working on submarines. And then they hand me a bunch of spreadsheets to work on. I'm like, okay, I'm stuck in this office that was built in 1942. And, the air conditioner's broken and we're spending time like chasing down birds that fly into the office. I kid you not. One of our principal engineers is an expert at catching sparrows with printer paper boxes. And I'm like,
that's a skill you don't see marketed very often.
No, yeah, you should have put that on LinkedIn. But we're supposed to be working on, and we were working on the most advanced war machine on the face of the planet, but it felt like accounting. It felt hollow.
Not very adventurous.
It wasn't adventurous, yeah. And granted, sure, I had probably way too high of an expectation of how that job was supposed to feel, but I felt disappointed in what it ended up being, and a lot of that was on me for not making it what I could have made it. But that was a big turning point of like, I could make this more adventurous, but I don't know that I want to put in the effort.
Was it a little bit like your dream was slipping away, which caused you to realize maybe that wasn't the dream you really wanted?
Yeah, I think that's a good way to put it. And then the kind of other big turning point was becoming a dad. When our son Alex was born, I was like, oh, my dream is no longer just about me and my wife anymore. It's not about just doing something cool and providing for our small families. Now we've got to make sure that we create an environment that we want for our family legacy.
That'll change the dream, won't it?
It did. And so I remember a lot of hard discussions and a lot of tears over letting that dream die and picking up a new one, planting the seeds for a new one.
And because I know they've been mentioned a couple of times, and everyone's gonna ask, how many kids do you have?
We have 3. We've got Alex, who is about to turn 6 in October. We have Jane, Adventure Jane, who is 3, and we have Felicity, or Fez for short, and she's about to turn 1 here at the end of the month.
Oh, that's awesome. A wonderful family, and they're absolutely adorable.
We're in a pile of cute over here.
For sure. It's like kittens, but they're kids.
Yeah, exactly.
So So as you let that old dream die and you picked up a new one, and what I know of you is not only did you pick it up, but you really defined it and laid it out. Of course, using all of your engineering skill to do that. What does that new dream look like, and how has that taken shape?
Yeah, it has taken shape from, the job is now a hard second to my family. Like
Okay.
any
What
job,
does that mean?
it means if my job starts affecting how I treat my family and how much time I spend with them and my connection with them, I'm going to drop it like it's hot.
So an important question here, because I can only imagine many in the audience are going to hear that and go, "That's fine. That sounds lovely. But if I did that, there would be this huge negative consequence." How has that in practicality worked for you, and has it created negative situations?
Every time that I have done that, from moving away, killing my dream job, moving halfway across the country into a job that I thought was my dream job, finding out it was a nightmare, and then getting out of that, every time it has been short-term pain for long-term joy and hope.
So it wasn't that there was no pain in making that choice. It was
Oh, it was very painful every time.
right. Was it maybe more the only way to the other side, that being the joy, is through the pain?
Yep.
So
Yep.
be willing to bite the bullet to get through it, to do what you believe is right, but when you do, the right things happen.
Yeah. Every time, it was funny enough, we did this exercise in church, one of our small group discussions once, about kind of a timeline of your life of, going, charting the positive and the negative and the highs and the lows. And every time there was a big low, there was a big high right afterwards. And it's been really interesting how that's gone. Every time I've gone into that deep valley after, giving up on a dream or having to shift, a really big peak has come right afterwards.
It's interesting, as I've spoken with, I guess, thousands of people over the years. I've found that in general there are two broad categories of people. There are people whose lives are pretty much in the middle, right? And they have these smaller ups and downs. Not that they have no big downs or no big ups, but in general it's like this small, slow incline, and they're steady. And then there are people for whom it's just like peaks and valleys. But like you said, every time they'll have this valley, and where someone would say, "Man, I am thankful I'm not you." And then 3 months later, they'll have this peak where people go, "I'm jealous I'm not you." The growth through that, I suppose both probably get to the same place, but the growth through that feels pretty intense.
Yeah, it is. Yeah, my life's been kind of like a mountain range in that.
I relate more than I probably wish I did.
Yeah, well, I think yours is even more of a, you're more like Himalayas. I'm kind of the Rockies.
It's not a competition I want to win, so I won't enter. So as you have shaped that dream, what does that dream look like for you now? If you were to say, this is what my dream looks like, what is it?
My dream is to be a whole and heart healthy man that is exercising my masculine energy on a daily basis and creating a legacy of epic experiences for my family, impacting new causes that I care about, and living a life of clarity and freedom that I can lead others into as well.
So I've got to ask you. You used a phrase there that jumps out at me, and I suspect will jump out at others. You said that you want to exercise your masculine energy, and I don't want to lose the rest of your vision there, because I think it's gorgeous. I think it's beautiful. It's inspiring. I believe that because we talk about it. I've asked this question before, and I want to make sure not to miss it here. What do you mean by exercising your masculine energy?
Yeah. So a few things there is. Giving of my strength to serve others, building that strength through physical hardship, being aggressive, but towards the right things, and being self-controlled, being stoic.
So are those things that are not for women? Or is it more just a balance?
Yeah, I think it's just a balance. It gets So you know me. I love the author John Eldridge, and he puts kind of the three big things that are on the hearts of men more as this. There's an adventure to live, a battle to fight, and a beauty to rescue. And not in the knight in shining armor kind of sense, but in a bring into the world kind of sense.
Right.
And so that's kind of what I'm getting at in the masculine energy things of I want to live out my adventures daily. And that means to me being prepared to do any kind of adventure I want to do, whether that's physically, mentally, emotionally.
And let me see if I can put a button on this, because I know you pretty well, and I know that you are not only a supporter of women and
oh, absolutely, yeah,
and of all that, but you support women in adventure. So what I'm
I'll
hearing is that
this
maybe
the distinction, and then I'll let you wrap it up. And how I'll say how John says this, and I agree that in general, the heart of women is for an adventure to be swept up into, to be an irreplaceable part of an adventure, to have a beauty to unveil, and to be captivating to others. And so that's kind of how he would put it. And yeah, one thing that I've found in my experience is that, male and female aren't physical characteristics, but masculine and feminine are distinct and different. And it's awesome that they're different, but it's not just the physical. It's not a blanket generality statement either. It's just, this is kind of more often than not, and not to say that women can't be fierce and that certain women aren't, but more often than not, it's men who come alive when they're fierce rather than.
So what may currently be stereotypes and have negativity associated with them in society were formed maybe from the basis of something that were tendencies that were real, but the stereotypes are the stereotypes, the negative pieces of them aren't what we're talking about here. What we're talking about here are the positive engenderings of energy, tendency, growth, adventure, etc. Is that a reasonable way to put that?
Yeah, exactly. It's what brings us together. It's how we complement each other and work together in teams, coordinating together.
And everything that I've seen of you and your team and your family is that you pull that together in a beautiful way. And so I wanted to explore that for the audience because I think it's a natural question, but I also think that it is beautiful how you make that living,
and I'll give you some examples. So Tracy's in the other room. She won't mind me talking about her. So how we do this, and she actually told me that she really appreciated, we went to Normandy this summer for the 75th anniversary of D-Day. And though she was not interested in the slightest in going to northern France, she appreciated that I took it on of setting what I call the desired end state for the trip of, having some adventure, learning some history, connecting together, exploring the culture, and put together most of the plans. And she just appreciated just being able to enjoy that and go along for the ride. She is amazingly talented at bringing beauty into the world. She's a music teacher. So she every day fills our home with music and joy and laughter. And she's ridiculously gorgeous as well. But just does
you got the brownie points all in there.
Oh yeah. She has a way of carrying herself that is just beauty embodied. Awesome. That I really appreciate.
Much like yourself.
She is a good counterpoint to my.
For those who can't see Dan, one of the things he's known for is his beard, and he has a beard that should probably have its own name at this point.
We do need to have a contest to name the beard.
Yeah, that's for real. So your dream is so beautiful, to move forward in the way that you are, to create that adventure in life, and to grab it and shape it with the priorities that you have of family and engagement. I love it. When you think of your defining moment as an entrepreneur, as even as a worker, but really as an entrepreneur, what you formed into being, is it one of the things you've already mentioned, or is it something different, some different moment?
So one of them was that starting the 3D printing group. The other one was more recent. So I've started over the past couple of years studying under and now teaching with my good friend and mentor, Larry Yatch, who's a retired Navy SEAL officer and engineer. And one of my favorite moments with him that really hit it off for me was last summer. That the previous spring, I had actually invited him and gotten him to be able to speak at a National Science Foundation conference, and everyone said that he was the best presentation they'd seen at that conference in years.
Wow.
And
He's a pretty amazing guy.
It was pretty amazing. No surprise to me, of course. But he gave me a challenge coin from SEAL Team 3.
Oh, man.
Which I keep in my pocket every day. And after the conference, we spent the whole evening walking around downtown Alexandria, Virginia, just talking about being men and fathers and our origin stories and what we care about. And we've formed a really deep friendship. And fast forward a few months, I'm visiting him in between the University of Florida and Florida International University, and get to meet his family, his wonderful wife Ann and his two boys, Colton and Hunter. And after dinner, he's like, "Hey, you want to go diving?" I'm like, "It's dark." Like, okay. Like, so we put on our snorkel gear and grab some flashlights and a dive flag and some stuff for trying to catch lobster, and we just walk off the beach in the dark. And now I'm diving at night with the Navy SEAL because that's what I do now.
That'd be quite the moment.
It was an amazing turning point of like, this is life now. Like, this is a regular Wednesday.
Now, some moments we appreciate then. So at these inflection points, some we don't recognize until later. Were you able to pause and really
it was both
that?
Oh yeah, very much so. It was like, we got out in the water a little ways, and just, once I was able to catch my breath, because I'm not as good of a diver as he is by any stretch. And,
you weren't quite up to the Navy SEAL diving standards yet?
No. So I'd pop down. We were in like 30 feet of water. I'd get near the bottom for all of 10 seconds and then pop back up and go, and I just watch him and just stay down there for like a minute and a half, 2 minutes, and just pop back up, take a breath, go back down. I'm like, is this really happening? He's like watching a jellyfish. I mean, just expending no energy at all. And like, I'm in the water with him because he wants me here, and because I've got what it takes to be here with him right now. And that felt really good.
And it should. Congratulations on that. That's quite a transformation, quite a moment to be able to celebrate. And as you said, I love your quote, "This is what I do now." It wasn't, this is just an event that's a one-time thing. So many people will say, "Oh, this is the trip of a lifetime," or "This is the moment of a lifetime," or "This is that." You thought, "This is what I do now."
Yeah. And it turned into, that Normandy trip was a similar thing. Like, it started on a comment thread on GoRuck's Facebook page when they announced the event with Jason McCarthy, who's the founder of GoRuck. GoRuck, by the way, is a company run by a former Army Ranger where you carry things in heavy rucksacks, usually logs and other people. But he's like, "Hey, we're doing this event, bunch of events in Normandy. You should come. It's going to be amazing." And I kind of half jokingly said, "Oh, haha, what if I bring my 3 kids along?" Something to that effect. He's like, "Yeah, you should. I'll bring mine." And we started talking about, "Oh yeah, we'll have our kids building sandcastles on Omaha Beach." And it turned into a friendship that, had him actually messaging me when we were in the hospital with Tracy delivering Felicity. And he's like, "Hey, time to use your GoRuck training tonight. Don't fall asleep. Drink your coffee outside. Bring your wife ice chips and massage her feet. You got this." It's like,
wow,
who does that? Like, I've got freaking, CEO of a, granted small company, but big in my heart. messaging me as a dad, and it's like, this is just what happens now.
It sounds like it was no longer about a moment or even an individual relationship or an individual job. It was that you had finally woven the threads of the lifestyle that you were creating.
Yeah, absolutely. And that's why now when I talk about what I want to do, it's not a job that I want to have. It's not a business I want to create. It's an environment. It doesn't restrict the jobs and businesses I can take or create anymore.
Pretty beautiful picture, one that I agree with passionately, as you well know. Yeah, you went to Normandy. You do all of these amazing things. You've had all of these incredible adventures. What's the biggest risk that you've ever taken?
Oh man. Well, you know me. I'm also very risk averse.
I do, and you are, and yet you still get over the hump of them. You just have to. You have to get there and have enough momentum behind you.
Yeah. I mean, I think the biggest risk I've ever taken is getting into this world of personal development, of like I think it was starting with Larry, like learning from him, and then being like, oh, you want me to be on your team now? Okay, let's figure out how to make that happen. That was a really big risk of, well, I'm not just an employee anymore. Like, I'm creating something else. And, there was a bit of danger there that, if I spent too much time or energy on it, could end my job. I realized later that that's not actually a real risk, but yeah, it's hard for me to answer because you know me, I hedge my risks so much. It's hard to even say what is a risk for me anymore.
I think it's pretty informative to our audience to be talking or listening to Adventure Dan, the guy who's known for adventure and big thrills and all of these things that you've done in different states and going to France and having these amazing stories. And yet to hear that you're risk averse, that's pretty empowering.
Yeah, I mean, so it's because I think of everything like an engineer, and now to a certain extent like a special forces operative, right? I don't wander into things blindly. I set up the environment ahead of myself so that I'm successful. So that like Larry jumping out of a plane in the middle of the night from 30,000 feet with oxygen on, it's not a risk for him anymore to do that because he's trained thousands of hours to be able to accomplish that successfully. Same for me. Of anything I'm getting into, I train enough, I build up a network enough, I build up a team enough to where it's no longer a risk to step into enemy territory because I can take it.
And you can make decisions that might seem risky to others because you've spent thousands of hours preparing for it.
Yeah.
Very nice. You mentioned that as part of that biggest risk, you learned a lot of lessons. As an entrepreneur, as an adventurer, what's the biggest lesson you've learned along the way?
Not to take myself so seriously. Funnily enough, I got actually a challenge this week that I just noticed that I'm failing miserably at. I actually chuckle after my sentences quite a bit as a defense mechanism. So kind of a two-parter there. One of the things I've learned is that to not take myself so seriously, anything I do, I'm not building nuclear submarines anymore, right? So anything I'm doing is not going to be the end of the world if I fail at it. And so what's the harm in trying? The other thing is also being more mindful about my life in general, about the way I approach things, about the way I make decisions that we've talked about a lot. Mindfulness has been a huge lesson of just being aware of when my emotions are starting to be in control rather than my brain, and being able to change that and choose, okay, I've got this Y in the road. My emotions want to take me down here and there be dragons. Down here is where I want to go. By being mindful, I can see that there is a Y in the road and choose the path towards what I want.
That emotional one is especially dangerous because you're a dragon slayer. We already established that.
I love to slay dragons.
You know I can slay the dragons. I know that you and I have had, as I have with many clients that I've worked with, have had conversation after conversation about this idea of data versus emotion. That emotions are great to reinforce a decision, but decisions should be made based upon data. And that is so much easier said than done.
Oh yeah.
What piece of advice might you give the audience as you have been learning that lesson, and to take the other part of the why?
Yeah, I think the other thing is like, not all data is numbers.
Right.
You know, a lot of what's been really successful lately is actually going through data of interviews, of feedback from family, from friends, from, you know, widening circles of contacts around this business of adventure. All of that is data. And it's, you know, taking these conversations as a process for learning and improving and growing, and knowing it's all data and I can choose to act on it or not.
That sounds like a very sound piece of advice, to remember that data isn't just numbers, to use the data that is there, that isn't just numbers, to inform your decisions and to help you create objectivity in the middle of the storm.
Yeah. But also, numbers are important, big and small. And I was talking with our now mutual friend, Josh Spodek, about my numbers for my business. And we realized there was a key driver in there of something I had missed about, you know, being able to pay myself sooner rather than later, and a few other things that was like, oh, wow, yeah, that puts into stark clarity exactly what I need to do with my business. You know, I need to focus on getting a couple sponsors and selling some merchandise so I can afford to pay myself, so that I won't drop this whole thing when it gets hard.
Nice.
And, you know, there's a couple of things that are like, oh yeah, I need to focus on that one thing and that one thing, because that's going to be the biggest drivers of me actually continuing this thing.
Really good resources that you have in your life, Josh and Larry and Ann. Pretty fantastic people to be connected with to drive you forward. And I'm thankful to know each of them as well. When you think about years ago, when you were starting this entrepreneurial process, you were starting this rekindling of adventure, what do you wish that you'd known then that you know now?
That it's more about the environment that I want to create rather than any one specific idea. Another quote from Josh, actually, that's been extremely effective lately: the idea of a lifetime comes along once a month. And to not get so married to all of my ideas that I, you know, drive them into the ground or drive myself into the ground with an idea that actually isn't, you know, all that great.
Or hold on to it like it was your whoopee without being willing to go on to something else.
Yeah, I did that with my furniture business, right? So my first kind of entrepreneurial journey, I made myself hate woodworking. I lost my love of building things with wood, which I really did love, and I'm now returning to enjoying again after holding on to the idea that I should make money building furniture for others in this certain way so long, and with such, you know, strength, that I crushed it. I crushed my own dream.
That's a powerful lesson.
Yeah.
How do you ensure that you aren't going to crush it now?
I get a lot of feedback on how I'm going, and I'm not as afraid to ditch big parts even of an idea to make it be more effective.
Would you say that willingness to adapt is one of the most important characteristics maybe of being a successful entrepreneur?
Yeah, I think for sure. It's the one of the biggest things is taking contingencies into account and having multiple ways to solve for them that might involve changing one of your strategies in a major way.
I like to refer to that as strong ideas loosely held, or strong opinions loosely held.
Yeah, exactly. And not like my toddler daughter who has strong opinions that are loosely researched.
Yeah, yes, that's. I think there are many listening who can who have children who can relate to that for sure. Are there any particular resources other than the books you've mentioned and a couple of people that you've mentioned that you would call out that you would say have made it easier for you to chase your dreams? You seem to be a resource guy.
Yeah, I
Are there any
mean,
resources you would call out?
I love me some Tim Ferriss. The 4 Hour Work Week was really big, and I wish I had read it sooner. I really loved both Tools of Titans and Tribe of Mentors. I went through an entire package of tape flags on Tools of Titans, just
Wow.
categorizing different things. But lately, actually, I've been digging his book, The 4 Hour Chef, because I'm wanting to learn skills faster myself and be able to teach them to others. It's
It's
really
worth
good.
mentioning that his book, The 4 Hour Chef, isn't just about cooking.
No, it's not. It's about how to learn anything quickly, and the important parts of anything quickly, so that you can then teach others if you want to.
That was actually, oddly enough, the first of his books that I read. And
Mm,
then I went to the 4 Hour Work Week, and then the others came out. We'll connect to those books in the show notes as well.
yeah.
Tim Ferriss has been a tremendous resource. His podcast was part of my origin story of this company. He's a lot of the reason that I'm here now is having been connected into that thanks to a wonderful instructor at our karate school as well.
Oh, that's awesome.
So I greatly appreciate that. Anything else that you would call
Yeah,
out
another
as a
book that
resource?
I can't recommend highly enough. I literally read it 4 times last year, and it's not one that a lot of your audience is probably going to think of, and some probably will never read it, and that's fine. But it's called Walking with God by John Eldredge, and it's his prayer journal from a year that's got some edits to it. But it really taught me how to take a step back and, in my prayer life, ask, what's my next step here? And who are my allies in this? And be so okay with hearing, you just need to put your foot here. And then you need to put your foot here. And you don't need to worry about that hill over there. Just look at your feet and focus on that next step. And I'll, as it says, be a light unto your feet and a light to your path, right? And that's been so huge for me to understand what that actually looks like and feels like. That book helped a ton in cultivating a more conversational relationship with God. That's helped me a ton in this entrepreneurial journey and just in life in general. But a couple highlights from the book were he was actually thrown from his horse and broke both wrists, and was then asking God later as he was in the hospital, like, what are you trying to teach me here? He's like, you need to learn how to accept help from others and to slow down. Like, oh, interesting. Like, he's a writer, right? And then he can't write for like 9 weeks.
Right.
He can't drive. He could barely eat by himself. Like, all these things. He's, a driven guy like us. And he had to take a hard stop and ask for and accept help from others, which was not easy to do. And so it was an interesting way to look into some of my own moments of suffering, of like, okay, what are you trying to teach me here? It's not just suffering for suffering's sake.
Right.
So
That's
anyway, that's
a pretty powerful lesson, and we'll include that book in the show notes as well.
I mean, I could go on for hours, but those are some of the big ones.
I know, that's great. We'll certainly include those resources and make sure that they're connected. I love that you've been able to share so many. As you've been through so many things in your life, so many different changes, so many different industries, this entrepreneurial journey, crushing some of your own dreams, seeing some of them build, moving onward, going to Normandy, meeting Navy SEALs and everything else. I know that I and others have looked at you as an example that dreams really are real. How do you feel when people refer to you in that way and say, man, that's a guy who's an example that dreams are real?
It feels really good, but also crazy. Like, because it wasn't that long ago when I would have said you were insane for saying dreams are real. Like, just a couple of years ago, even. And now I know it's true and that I have, really accomplished something, and I'm just getting started.
You are just getting started, and yet you've come so far. It's a pretty inspiring journey. And as we wrap up our conversation, I want to move into our Fortunate Five. These are 5 questions we ask at the end of every podcast that share ways in which maybe we've had fortunate experiences, or there's some coming to you or to the world. They're just quick rapid fire questions. You can take a little longer to answer them if you like. The first one is this: what is the most exciting or adventurous thing you've ever done? And I think this, by the way, may be the most anticipated question of this entire podcast for our audience with Adventure Dan.
Okay, so I'm going to take a pause and define adventure in my distinction first, so people know what I'm talking about, which I don't know how we've gotten this far in here without me saying this yet. But anyway, adventure is an experience where you learn through persevering into the unknown, finding fulfillment. Learning, persevering, unknown, fulfilling. I can't think of an experience more those things than the Go Ruck Star course, which was this July. My legs still hurt when I talk about it. It was an event where we have a team of 2 to 5, and unlike a typical Go Ruck event where you're led around a city by special operations forces, you meet your cadre, they give you a set of waypoints, and you go about your business, navigating at least 50 miles in less than 20 hours, and you have a 20-pound steel plate in your pack. And we did this in Indianapolis in the middle of July. We started at 9 o'clock at night, and we went to some points downtown. We were feeling really good, and then our next waypoint was 18 miles away. I'm like, oh dear God, it just got real. And we ended up getting to Conner Prairie in Fishers, Indiana from downtown. We actually met a Indianapolis police officer at the Soldiers and Sailors Monument. She thought we were doing something cool, and followed us on Instagram.
Nice.
And we get to Conner Prairie just as the sun is rising, and we're like, we are totally and mortally screwed, because the day was going to get extremely hot. And we had, at that point, November. This was in July.
Yeah, hot.
So we had only done at that point about 23 miles. And we were going to complete 51.2. And most of it during the heat. And it got up to, I don't know, the high 90s with a heat index well over 100. At one point, I got heat exhaustion, and at least one of our other teammates did. Like, I started getting goosebumps and dizziness and nausea. The few things that kept me going. So at one point, actually right after Conner Prairie, one of our guys wanted to quit. I put on a YouTube video of the Ranger Creed. That would be a great thing to link in the show notes. But one of the points in there is surrender is not a Ranger word. And so I used that with our team. I was like, hey, surrender is not a word we use today, boys.
Nice.
And the other thing was, I found this playlist on Spotify of Navy SEAL running cadences. The everywhere we go, that kind of stuff. And that would set us up with a 15.5 mile pace if we actually lived to it. And a couple of times, one of our team members was dragging. I would grab his ruck, throw that on, be like, follow me. We're going as far as we can at this pace until we collapse. And,
wow.
One time we had, I don't know, about 1.5 miles or so to our next waypoint. I'm like, okay, John, we're going to do this. We're going to kick this into high gear. I grab his ruck, I kick on the cadence, and he was destroyed at that point. And we somehow lived that 15.5 mile pace for about 1.5 miles to our next waypoint. We had some rest, we got some water. And then later in the day, we had 2 waypoints left, the Indy Velodrome, where they have, outdoor cycle track. And then we had to make it to the Motor Speedway, which is about 3.7 miles or so from there. and it was really hot. We had actually met up with some other teams doing the 12-mile star course, and one of my friends I'd done a couple events with before, he's like, "Is that you, Dan? You look terrible. Stink." And they took our picture, and I was like, I don't know how we're going to do this other than I better lead the way, because that's what a leader does. And when everybody's feeling crappy, is I'm going to encourage them by doing something crazy. So I took my buddy John's ruck. I threw on the cadences. I'm like, I'll see you guys at the speedway. And I just took off uphill, mind you. And I got about a mile and a half before I started feeling heat exhaustion and sat down under a tree and waited for them to catch up. And we got to the
incredible journey.
We got to near the end, and one of the cadre, who's a Navy SEAL, Cadre Cody, comes up. He's like, "Hey, you guys are gonna miss time. You're running up against time. You guys better find another gear." And I was like, "Okay, one more time." And we started doing this call and response cadence we've been doing all night of, feeling good, looking good, ought to be in Hollywood. Hoo yeah, we started running. Like, we actually started jogging after 50.1 miles, and we ended up finishing all at once, jogging across this park, and then just collapsing in a heap. And I have never been, aside from getting married and being a father, so emotionally fulfilled as when those men came up to me afterwards and were like, "You showed true strength of character and leadership, and I would storm the gates of hell with a water gun if you asked me to."
That's an incredible story, Dan. Thanks for sharing that. And I followed it on Instagram as well. I was certainly out there cheering for you. And,
Fellowship of the Beard.
I was a little thankful that I lived 4 hours away for fear that I may have gotten roped into that. And I'm not
There's always a chance.
I wasn't quite ready for that adventure yet. Maybe someday, but
there's two adventures this next year that are almost that level of crazy if you want to train up for.
Well, it's interesting you say that, because for you and only you, I have a part B of this question.
Ooh.
Which is, what is the future most exciting or adventurous thing that you're looking towards?
Okay, I have two possible and one most definite. The most definite one is actually I'm going to be tandem skydiving with my buddy Larry in December.
That's awesome. I'm jealous of. I have been looking for a partner to tandem skydive with for a long time.
Well, funnily you should ask. He's running a boot camp for entrepreneurs in Tampa, Florida, December 5th through the 7th, and part of that is skydiving with Larry. So if you or anyone listening is interested, feel free to get a hold of me. I'll do some details.
Nice.
But then coming up in February, so I'm deciding between one or both of these Go Ruck events next year. February is the Fort Bragg Heavy. Those of you who don't know, Fort Bragg is the home of the Army Special Forces, and is a special place in the heart of the Go Ruck community, and they make it very, very heavy. 24-hour event, 40 plus miles, and a lot of cold and wet. And then in October of 2020, so it's a ways away, which is why I'm thinking I might just do both. They're doing a double tough in Washington, D.C., led by Cadre Igor, who is a member of Task Force Ranger from the Battle of Mogadishu. Wow. And if they get enough people, they will have two other cadre who are also Task Force Ranger members. And the second of the two toughs will be an 18-hour, hour-by-hour recreation of the Battle of Mogadishu.
Oh, dear.
Yeah.
You're going to have a pretty exciting year. Thanks for sharing those. We'll look forward to following you on all the social media, and who knows, maybe I'll come and cheer you on.
Yeah, at least see at the index when I collapse in a pile of bones and what used to be muscle.
Fair enough. So the second question, I suspect, is a little bit easier. What is something that you wish you were good at but aren't yet?
Selling.
Well, that was easier, right? So,
Yeah. I really wish I was better at that.
fair enough. What's the best meal or food experience that you've ever had?
Oh, man. Okay. Can I give this a two-parter because it is different?
You're Adventure Dan. You can do whatever
Okay,
you like.
I'll give the adventurous answer first. So the best food experience was eating steamed tilapia in the jungles of Panama from one of the indigenous tribes out of a banana leaf wrapper.
That's pretty
It
adventurous.
was really cool. But like the best food experience actually was in my own backyard, or best meal. Um, it's so simple. It's barely a recipe. A caveman probably cooked it. Skirt steak with salt on it. You leave it on your counter for an hour, and then you fire up some coals in the meantime, natural chunk. You slap it on the coals for a minute and a half each side, wrap it in foil for a few minutes to rest, slice it up, and it is literally the best steak I have ever had, and is stupid simple. And every year on my birthday, since I've turned 30, I have a Scotch steak and Star Wars party, which is one of my favorite meals of the year, where we
Scotch, steak, and Star Wars. Quite the combination. And your favorite Scotch is?
currently Lagavulin 12 year.
All right. So skirt steak, Lagavulin 12 year, and Star Wars. Any particular movie there?
We rotate every year, so
Okay. No favorite though?
I mean, I gotta go with Empire. It's classic.
Fair enough. What is your dream travel destination? You've been to some cool places. Where do you want to go that's a dream?
I really want to go to Thailand. I'm ready for an adventurous yet relaxing vacation.
I can personally attest, having been there earlier this year, that Thailand is a cool place with some amazing people. I had a chance to spend time with the elephants and the tigers and be there during Songkran, the water festival. It was a pretty fantastic experience in Chiang Mai we had.
I've never been to Asia, so that's on the list.
Well, we can make that happen for sure. And there are a lot of listeners in Asia, so I'm certain they will be glad to help make the journey a memorable one.
Yeah, and all your friends in the Philippines. Tracy's extended family lives in partially near Manila and partially at Labo in Camarines Norte. So we are intending to go there at some point.
Well, maybe we can coordinate trips. You'll have fun. For
Oh
sure.
yes.
You'll be there. You'll be there for a while, connecting with family. It'll be a good time. Last of the fortunate five. What do you hope? And I'm interested in your engineer's perspective on this. I have a thought as to what you may say. What do you hope or believe will be the most exciting invention of the next 30 years?
Oh man. I'm going to say it's exciting in the way that is going to bring us together, I hope, is a way for us to travel to Mars. All
right. Well, then I get the point. I definitely get the Jeopardy answer. I knew it had to be related to your Mars planning, right?
I mean, I was just trying to think, like, what brings us together more than something of that grand of a spectacle of adventure as sending someone to another planet and seeing them arrive safely 8 minutes after they have actually arrived safely.
Right. That'd be a pretty amazing invention, and I suspect you'll have a hand in that all the way there.
It's really weird to think, like, I'm going to have a small part to play in that going well, and it's really cool.
Well, you've had a large part to play in many people's lives. You'll have a small part to play, maybe, who knows, maybe a large part in generations of lives as we look forward to Mars. That's pretty cool. And I want to thank you so much, Dan, for having been here, and
It's been great.
Give you a moment to share any thought or message. And you're one with many messages, but one clear vision. What is a thought or message that you'd like to leave with our audience?
Yeah, it's don't let cost or time or anything that you are thinking of right now hold you back from embracing adventure in your life. There's dignity in casual adventures that are low risk and don't require any planning that will bring you a hell of a lot of joy. So yeah, don't let that hold you back from a life full of adventure, and be proud of smaller adventures regularly, and get out there and do those.
Great thought, great message. Where can people find you online or otherwise?
You can find me on my website, the Anthem of the Adventure. Actually, there's no the in it. It's just anthemoftheadventurer.com. You can follow the podcast as well on all the major podcast platforms, Anthem of the Adventurer. Join our Facebook group, the Anthem of the Adventurer Tribe, where you get to interact with Dan and all the other adventurers. We got actually most of the podcast guests are in there too, which I find really amazing, seeing you guys interact. And not on Instagram as the Anthem of the Adventurer yet, but be looking forward to that as I go into the fall and do some more visual focused things. So yeah, that's where you can find me. Pretty easy to get a hold of.
Yeah, great places to see you, great places to interact. I appreciated being a guest on that podcast early on and being part of the community and the tribe that you are building, and even seeing you interact in our Dreams Are Real group, where you hang out and are found from time to time. Again, thank you so much for joining us. You have been a fantastic guest. I love hearing your stories, and I look forward maybe to a part 2 sometime in the future.
That would be great. I'm happy to come back anytime, Dan. Thanks a lot.
Thank you for joining us on the Dreams Are Real podcast. If anything we've said has inspired you to dream bigger, live more boldly, or move closer to your ideal life, please reach out and let us know. And also, be sure to share this episode with a friend. We would be honored if you would like, subscribe, or leave a review for our show on your favorite podcasting platform. And for more discussion of this episode and all things related to the Dreams Are Real podcast, and to receive your free download of Dan's Defining Your North Star training, please join our Dreams Are Real community on Facebook. Until next time, be amazing and keep crushing it.